funding her for the water credits and vouchers, and further, the municipal manager must further take urgent steps to establish an accessible and effective mechanism to address and remedy complaints pertaining to such refunds, and monitor response time, efficiency of these mechanisms, report to the council on the establishment of such mechanisms. So by reporting to the council, at least that will be institutionalized within the municipality. The next matter relates to Mr. Peterson against the South African National Defence Force. It was an undue delay, maladministration, improper conduct by the SANDF, SABC, and the Compensation Fund with regard to an investigation onto the death of Lieutenant Daniel Peterson and the reporting, processing, and payment of the Compensation Fund benefits. The complaint was lodged by the deceased mother, Ms. Peterson, who alleged that he was the member, or in fact, Daniel was a member of SANDF who collapsed while participating in an exercise marathon in 1998 and was rushed to hospital in George, Western Cape, where he died as a result of heat stroke. He had been comatose at the time of his passing. She also alleged that SABC in Oudtshoorn investigated her son's death and promised to keep her abreast, but failed to do so. She further alleged that SANDF held a military board of inquiry into her son's death and never informed her of the outcome. In addition to this, Ms. Peterson alleged that SANDF failed to timeously report her claim for payment of compensation benefits to the Compensation Fund, and that the fund also failed to attend to the claim and unduly delayed to process the payments of the benefits. I decided to investigate 5 issues. The first one, whether SABC delayed to investigate the death of the deceased and keep the complainant informed. In the absence of substantive evidence, I could not make a determination on the alleged undue delay, but I find that SABC failed to keep the complainant informed about progress in the investigation. The second issue is against SANDF for delaying the finalization of the military board inquiry into the deceased death and failed to communicate the findings to the complainant. This undue delay allegations is not substantiated. However, SANDF did fail to inform the complainant about the inquiry findings. The third issue relates to whether SANDF failed to timeously report the claim to the Compensation Fund and to submit comprehensive documents for the fund for the processing and payment of compensation benefits to the complainant found the allegation to be substantiated. Fourth, whether the fund delayed to process the claim for compensation benefits. And fifth, whether the complainant was unfairly prejudiced by the conduct of SABC, SANDF, and the fund. These allegations are substantiated, and indeed Ms. Peterson suffered improper prejudice. To remedy this, I directed the National Commission of SABC to consider amending the standing orders to provide for informing the next of kin of progress made in an inquest investigation, and apologize in writing to Ms. Peterson for the failure to keep her informed of progress in the inquest investigation. The chief of the SANDF is also directed to issue a written apology to Ms. Peterson for failure to inform her of the outcome of the board of inquiry into her son's death. Lastly, the Compensation Commissioner must apologize as well to Ms. Peterson for the delay to process and pay compensation benefits to her within a reasonable time. Reports relating to abuse of power, we have Nkobelang versus Rustenburg Local Municipality, where there was an allegation that law enforcement officials at the Rustenburg Local Municipality in the northwest unlawfully removed the telephone containers belonging to Mr. Patrick Nkopele from the main taxi rank in the mining town during a midnight raid on the facility in May 2010. According to Mr. Nkopele, all 4 containers which allegedly housed a total of 13 prepaid telephone sets that him and his wife used to run a public phone business from the facility, were damaged beyond repair during their removal from the premises. Mr. Mkhwebane also alleged that he lost several other items, including cash of 200 rands, and he alleged that all these were the damage he suffered were up to the tune of 260,000, though he did not have a permit to run the business. The investigation focused on two issues: whether the actions of the municipality in removing the containers were unlawful. The allegations were found to be substantiated. The second issue, Mr. Mkhwebane suffered prejudice, and that matter was also substantiated. To remedy this conduct and maladministration, I directed the municipal manager to apologize in writing to the complainant, submit this report to council for consideration, and return the 4 containers to the complainant in the same condition they were at the time of removal. Alternatively, the municipal manager must obtain the quotations in respect of the damaged containers and compensate Mr. Mkhwebane in line with the least expensive of the quotations. Mhlahla versus Gauteng Department of Housing and Human Settlement. The allegation or the complaint by Mhlahla was the unlawful demolition of a house belonging to Mr. Mhlahla by Gauteng Department of Housing and Human Settlement. The house was allegedly razed to the ground in 2017 December by the Red Ants, who were contracted by the department. Mr. Mhlahla alleged that he built the house at his own expense in Atteridgeville, west of Pretoria, at a stand allocated by the city of Tshwane. I looked into the matter, the Gauteng office looked into the matter of the unlawful demolition of the house, and the investigation revealed that both these allegations are substantiated, and the remedy to remedy this improper and maladministration, the department will rebuild Mr. Mhlahla's house. He has agreed to this, and the parties agreed that the settlement agreement constitutes my findings and remedial action in this matter. Muthusi versus Ngaka Mudiri, Mulemo District Municipality. This complaint relates to alleged refusal and undue delay by the municipality to pay the company called Health and Hygiene Services for an amount of about 132,000 and 159,000 for services rendered and for the use of the company's equipment, respectively. In essence, the complainant alleged that in August, a company was awarded a 3-year contract to render hygiene services, including the supply of air fresheners and sanitizers, toilet seat sanitizers, urinal and water closet sanitizers, etc. In May 2013, the company allegedly received a letter from the municipal manager advising the company to temporarily cease rendering the services. However, later that month, a meeting was held between the parties, and the municipality agreed that the company should commence with the rendering services. Pursuant to the agreement with the supply chain manager, the company rendered the service until January 2014. It allegedly ceased rendering services because the municipality failed to pay them since 2013 May, as it could not longer afford to render more services without payment. And during the investigation by the Northwest Office, it was the following issues were checked: whether the municipality improperly failed to pay the company for the services rendered between May 2013 and January 2014, as well as the continued use of the hygiene equipment belonging to the company from February 2014 until July 2015. This allegation is substantiated, and the investigation whether the action by the municipality caused prejudice to the complainant is substantiated. To remedy this maladministration and improper conduct, The municipal manager was directed to ensure that this report is tabled before council for within 90 days, and the municipal manager must write a letter of apology to the complainant for the prejudice caused. Lastly, the municipal manager must ensure that the company is paid within 90 working days of the date of this report, and total amount of 237,450 for services rendered from May 2013 until January 2014, as well as for the continued use of the company's hygiene equipment from February 2014 until July 2015. The next one is also a Northwest matter investigated by the Northwest Office, Senzo versus the Northwest Department of Health. It was a failure by the Department of Health to process an appeal lodged by Mr. Senzo, Benjamin Senzo, following the outcome of a disciplinary process instituted against him. In the main, the complainant alleged that in 2012 April, the department subjected him to a disciplinary hearing on charges of fraud and corruption, and December 2012 was given an outcome of a disciplinary process in which the presiding officer found him guilty and recommended a sanction of dismissal. He lodged an appeal with the MEC. At the time, it was Dr. Masike, and the department allegedly failed to process his appeal. And when he inquired, it was indicated to him that his contract of employment has already expired 31 January 2013 before the appeal could be processed. The department indicated that since the complainant was no longer its employee, it was no longer necessary to process his appeal. But on analyzing this complaint, the department improperly failed to process the appeal. During that process, they were obligated to make sure that they process the appeal before even his contract expires. So these allegations are both substantiated, and then we directed the Mr. Sinto's appeal and provide him with the application, irrespective of the fact that he's no longer employed by the Northwest. And then the next one relates to complaints relating to irregular staff appointments and human resource matters. This relates to an anonymous complaint received against Dr. Kenneth Kaunda District Municipality. It's also in the Northwest, where it was alleged that the Northwest shortlisted and appointed a certain Mr. Mutsumi Khan to the position of District Sports, Recreation, Arts and Culture and Heritage Coordinator, even though he did not meet the minimum requirements for the position. Upon analyzing the information and resolved to investigate the irregular appointment of Mr. Khan to the position in question and whether such caused other potential candidates to suffer prejudice. These matters, both of them, the allegations were found to be substantiated, and the municipality incurred fruitless and wasteful expenditure by conducting a recruitment process which was irregular and in contravention of the Section 62(1)(d) of the MFMA. To remedy this, the Speaker is directed to ensure that the Council, in consultation with the MM, declare the appointment irregular, and the salary of Mr. Khan is reflected as an irregular expenditure in the municipality's financial statement for the period 1 April to date, and the municipal manager should, within 90 working days, take disciplinary steps for those who were involved in the regular appointment of Mr. Khan, and also initiate the review process to review this irregular appointment. Mudise versus Ligwa Taimani Local Municipality. This matter was also investigated by the Northwest Office for irregular appointment of the municipal manager, Mr. Ndoda Mgengo. Upon thoroughly studying the complaint and analyzing the matter, we then came up with 4 issues to investigate: whether the conduct of the municipality in allowing Mr. Mgengo to participate in the recruitment process and his final appointment as municipal manager caused a conflict of interest for him and amounted to maladministration. This allegation is not substantiated. Second, We've investigated whether the municipality irregularly appointed Mr. Mgengo, even though he lacked the required skills, expertise, competencies, and qualifications for the position of municipal manager in 2015 and 2018, respectively. The only allegation is about his 2015 appointment, which is substantiated. Thirdly, I looked into whether the municipality properly paid a 20% market premium allowance to him after his appointment as municipal manager, and whether such payment amounts to irregular expenditure. This allegation is substantiated. Lastly, the fourth one is the municipality, whether the municipality failed to comply with the processes as required by the relevant section in the Municipal Systems Amendment Act with regard to the appointment of Mr. Mgengo in 2015. The allegation is not substantiated. As part of the remedial action, the mayor is directed to take necessary steps to determine the amount of money paid to Mr. Mgengo as a market premium allowance for the 2015 appointment, and within 30 days of this report, compile a report with recommendations for the attention of the council, and the mayor must also ensure that this is tabled before the council in the first meeting subsequent to this report, determining the amount and report to allow the council to consider and deliberate on the report in resolving this. In addition to this, the council is to ensure that the decision taken following deliberations is communicated to the MEC within 15 days of this decision. The next matter relates to SABC versus Francis Bard Municipality. It also relates to an irregular appointment of a development planner in the Northern Cape province. In a complaint lodged with my office in 2017, Mr. Sebe, in his capacity as the representative of SAMU, alleged that the appointment of Ms. Mkhwebane as development planner was irregular, as she did not qualify for the position, and the interview panel did not recommend her for the appointment. Based on the complaint, I investigated whether the appointment was in accordance with the relevant laws and prescripts, because that's what we focus on as the public protector, especially the recruitment and selection of staff in the municipality, and whether the municipality was improperly and constituted, in fact, acted improperly, and that was maladministration. In both of these allegations, they were substantiated. To remedy this, the executive mayor was directed to take appropriate steps in respect of disciplinary action against the municipal manager, Ms. Bukhatsu, for the irregular appointment. The mayor must also conduct an analysis and evaluation of Ms. Mkhwebane's qualifications, experience, and competencies against the required job requirements or job description for the position she occupies, and submit a report to the municipal council, and take appropriate steps to institute proceedings for the judicial review of Ms. Mkhwebane's appointment, to review this appointment, and since it didn't comply to the requirements. And the council must consider the report of the executive mayor referred to above and take the resolution on the matter. The next matter relates to Ubega versus Victor Kanye local municipality. This was investigated by the Mpumalanga Public Protector Office. It relates also to irregular appointment of a certain Mr. N. Masango as Assistant Manager Youth Development by the Victor Kanye local municipality. The complaint was lodged by Mrs. Ubega, who was one of the candidates who applied for the position. She alleged that the vacancy was advertised and that one of the requirements was a degree. The municipality appointed Mr. Masango, who did not have a degree, and council directed the municipality to investigate the qualifications of Mr. Masango, and the process followed in his appointment after the public outcry. It also came to my attention that during the investigation, Ms. Ubega has since been appointed to that position, which she was aggrieved about, after Mr. Masango was transferred to the another position of Assistant Manager, Local Economic Development, which I've decided to include in my investigation. The investigation focused on 4 issues. Firstly, whether the municipality irregularly appointed Mr. Masango did not meet the minimum requirements for the position of Assistant Manager, Youth Development. This allegation was substantiated. Secondly, I investigated whether the complainant and the ratepayers suffered prejudice as a result of the municipality's conduct. This is unsubstantiated. Third, whether the transfer of Masango to the position of assistant manager, local economic development, comply with the recruitment processes and prescripts. This was found that it had complied. Lastly, whether Mr. Gubega's appointment to the position of assistant manager youth development after it was re-advertised, the recruitment processes and the legal prescripts were complied with, and indeed they were complied with. There was nothing wrong in her appointment. As part of remedial action, the Speaker, Mr. Sukhone, must within 30 days of this matter ensure that the Council, in consultation with the municipal manager, declare the appointment of Mr. Masango to the position as irregular, and the salary of Mr. Masango reflects as irregular expenditure in their financial statements, which is the period from May 2015 to 1 August 2018, when he was transferred to another position of assistant manager, local economic development. The Speaker, within 60 days, disclosed this irregular expenditure incurred by the municipality and to the provincial treasury and to the Auditor General. The municipal manager, on the other hand, must institute an investigation into the irregular appointment of Mr. Masango, as well as the incurring of this irregular expenditure. And further, she must train all the relevant staff which are responsible for recruitment and selection on the importance of complying with approved policies. That's the challenge we always face, that these irregular appointments, they don't comply with their own internal policies. Anonymous complaint versus the Northern Cape Economic Development, Trade and Investment Promotion Agency. This also relates to the allegation of improper conduct by this agency relating to the appointment of the Human Resource Manager, Mr. Luse, in 2012. The complaint which gave rise to the investigation was lodged anonymously, because people can still lodge complaints. And upon analysis of the investigation of the matter, we investigated whether the appointment of Mr. Luse was in accordance with the relevant laws and prescripts of this agency, and if not, whether the conduct was improper. Both allegations were substantiated, and we directed the MEC of Finance, Economic Development and Tourism to take appropriate action against the current CEO and the former chairperson of the agency board for irregular appointment of Mr. Luse. In addition, the board must institute proceedings for the judicial review of the irregular appointment of Mr. Luse. Both these actions to be taken within 60 days. The next one, Anonymous versus CRL Commission. This allegation was lodged against the CFO, Mr. Smith, of the CRL Commission, that he didn't have the necessary qualifications when he was appointed to the post. The investigation took longer. It was investigated. Indeed, he didn't have the qualifications, but then as time goes on, Mr. Smart acquired the necessary qualifications, and the matters which we investigated, whether the CRL Commission irregularly appointed Mr. Smart as the CFO when he was not suitably qualified for the position, and whether CRL Commission suffered prejudice as a result of this irregular appointment. I found both allegations to be substantiated. To remedy this maladministration in proper conduct, the CEO of CRL must initiate judicial review process to remedy and regularize the appointment of Mr. Smart, and disclose all irregular expenditure to the National Treasury incurred in connection with the irregular appointment. All this must happen within 60 working days. Anonymous versus South African Broadcasting Corporation. This matter was lodged anonymously against Ms. Balisa Chubisi to the position of producer or presenter of popular news eventuality program Morning Live at the South African Broadcasting Corporation. This complaint was lodged anonymously in 2017 June. In the main, the complaint alleged that SABC appointed Ms. 2BC to the position permanently in April 2016 without following and adhering to the recruitment procedures and prescripts that were applicable at the time. So they alleged that she was preferred ahead of other candidates who were suitably qualified and experienced. My investigation focused on whether SABC functionaries appointed her to the position in question without following and adhering to the applicable prescripts. I found that these allegations are substantiated. To remedy this improper conduct and maladministration, I directed the Group Chief Executive Officer of the SABC to take steps within 30 days of receipt of this report in line with the SABC recruitment processes and applicable prescript to confirm the appointment of Ms. Chubisi to the position of producer, presenter for SABC TV, or place her in a position commensurate with her level within SABC, or migrate her to the position of producer that she previously had at Lesedi FM, and take other steps provided for in the Labour Relations Act. The Group Chief Executive Officer must ensure that any irregular, frivolous, wasteful expenditure incurred by the SABC as a result of this improper conduct by any person is dealt with in accordance with the processes which are mentioned or are stipulated in the National Treasury guidelines on irregular expenditure. In addition, we must take steps after receiving this report to train, workshop, and educate employees on the adherence to the SABC policies and prescripts, including the values, principles, and principles stated in Section 195 of the Constitution, to act professionally, to act within the law, and the Batubili principles. Procurement irregularities, Malehu versus Constitution Hill. This matter relates to impropriety as far as procurement is related. In this one, we investigated, this was investigated by the Gauteng office, where there was an irregular award of a tender for cleaning services by the Constitution Hill in Gauteng to a company called Rabi Solution. The investigation was lodged, or the complaint was lodged by Ms. Ndo Malehu in 2017. In his complaint, Mr. Malehu alleged that Rabi Solutions was awarded a tender for cleaning services due to the owner, Ms. Siene, having a close relationship with the Constitution Hill Facilities and Operations Manager, Mr. Ntuli. He alleged that Rabi Solutions was 4 months old when it was awarded the tender and thus did not have the requisite experience. Then we decided to investigate the two issues where we had to find out whether there was any irregularity in the award of the tender and whether they lacked the required experience and whether there was any relationship between Mr. Ntuli and Ms. Sine of Rabi Solution. And I found that the allegations that the Constitution Hill irregularly appointed or awarded the tender in question to Rabi, even though the company concerned lacked the requisite experience, was not substantiated, as there was no tender which was awarded. However, it appears from the evidence that Rabi Solutions was regularly and improperly appointed for the job, meaning there was possibly a call for proposals by the Constitution Hill, or they were part of the Constitution Hill panel of service providers. The allegation that Mr. Ntuli is personally aligned to Rabi, if so, whether that amounts to a conflict of interest is substantiated. The allegation whether the complainant suffered prejudice is substantiated. To remedy the above, the CEO of Constitution Hill is directed to ensure that all members of BEC involved in the appointment of Rabi Solutions should be subjected to an internal investigation and disciplinary process. The CEO must further ensure that within 90 days of this report, all officials involved in the procurement process should attend a workshop to understand the provisions of Public Finance Management Act and the policies of the Constitution Hill relating to supply chain management. Another matter relates to Simbambato versus Transport Education Training Authority. This matter was investigated, was lodged by Mr. Simbambato, where there were allegations of abuse of power, tender irregularities in this TETA, Transport Education Training Authority. And although the matter was largely about procurement issues, it also had aspects pertaining to staff appointments. Mr. Simbambato made the following allegations: whether TETA irregularly awarded Mkhwebane Mahuma Consulting a contract for the provision of corporate governance compliance services without following Treasury regulations and TETA's SEM processes and procedures, whether TETA irregularly procured Deloitte to conduct information technology infrastructure technical assessment for the design of IT projects without following procurement processes, and further whether TETA's CEO, Ms. Mapifo Ano Frempong, previously known as Matlala, presented the facts during TETA's board meeting held 31 March 2010, stating that the procurement processes and subsequent award of the contract to Deloitte were properly done. The next one, whether an employee of Deloitte, Mr. Ubega, was appointed as a consultant, a chief financial officer at TETA. He procured the services of Deloitte Property Division for rectification of TETA's utility account and for the provided advice on building donated by Transnet, which is situated at Exforce Road, without following the supply chain management processes, and whether the CEO interfered and expressed an interest in the procurement of human resources integrated system from a company called SCube, which was recommended by a consultant of another company. This relates to violation of procurement processes, and whether TETA had a contract with Mondial IT Solutions Company and continued to use the service of Mr. John Smook, an IT consultant, even after he had resigned from this Mondial IT Solution Company. Another allegation, whether TETA appointed Mr. Modau, a labor consultant, to chair disciplinary hearing of Ms. Caldwell without following SCM policies. And the next one relates to CEO interfered or expressed interest in the recruitment and selection of the following staff members: Mr. Mono, PA to the CEO, Mr. Batlang, the former corporate services manager, Mr. Kanzi, the COO, Mr. Dladla, the executive officer, freight handling in Durban office, and Mr. Maluleka, and the procurement officer. The complainant was dismissed on frame charges in that she alleged to have interfered with job specifications of the position of the procurement officer during the recruitment for the post. The complainant was dismissed on frame charges for reporting the conduct of the CEO to the Minister of Higher Education. So we've got a lot of allegations. On investigation, the investigation revealed that, except for claims concerning the procurement of the services of Deloitte, CEO's interference or alleged interference and expression of interest in the procurement of the human resource integrated system, and the utilization of Mr. Smook, the recruitment, the consultant, and the recruitment and selection of this Batlang, Mono, Kanzi, Dladla, and Malulek. The complainant's dismissal and the rest of the other allegations were substantiated. So these ones I've mentioned were not substantiated. As part of the remedial action, the Minister of Higher Education was directed to take cognizance of the improper conduct and maladministration against TETA, board and senior officials, and ensure that appropriate disciplinary action is taken in terms of Section 84 of the PFMA against the remaining board members, and ensure that the implementation of the remedial action takes place. The chairperson of the TETA board must ensure that within 3 months of the date of this report, an evaluation into the effectiveness of all procurement and human resource policies is effected to determine systemic deficiencies. The chairperson must also ensure that all relevant staff is trained on TETA's procurement policies, legislative prescripts governing procurement in the public sector to prevent the recurrence of the transgression identified in this report. The next report relates to GADE versus Department of Water and Sanitation. This was a complaint lodged by AFF, the then General Secretary of EFF, a Member of Parliament. It was relating to procurement irregularities, maladministration within the Department of Water and Sanitation. And Mr. Gadi alleged that an anonymous letter was submitted to EFF in connection with the alleged corruption and procurement irregularities within the department, whereby several allegations were made in relation to purchasing the system application and product, which is SAP licenses. According to him, it was alleged that SAP licenses were purchased for both the department and water boards. The department had existing licenses that could accommodate additional users, but proceeded to procure new ones, and the licenses for the water boards were procured on their behalf without their consent, and or needs analysis being conducted. It was further alleged that Mr. Luvo Makasi, an employee of the department, had been influential in facilitating the deal, claiming to represent the interest of the former minister, Ms. Nomvula Mkonyane, by giving direct instruction to senior officials within the department. I focused my investigation on whether the department irregularly procured SAP licenses for itself and on behalf of the water boards, and if so, whether such conduct led to the department incurring irregular or fruitless and wasteful expenditure, and whether there was maladministration and improper conduct. I found that the allegation that the department irregularly procured the SAP licenses for itself and on behalf of the water boards is substantiated. I also found that the conduct of officials, Mr. Mkhize and Mr. Mate, amounts to maladministration and improper conduct, while the expenditure incurred as a result of irregular expenditure was irregular, fruitless, and wasteful. I could not find any evidence to substantiate the allegation of Mr. Makasi's influence and instruction to senior officials. We interviewed several senior department officials, all of whom denied the alleged involvement and interference by Mr. Makasi. Such interference, if there was any, would have shown the submission of insubmissions of internal documents like internal memoranda and approvals. As part of the remedial action, the Director General was requested to take note of my findings and ensure that any future information and communication technology procurement is aligned with the requirements of the Constitution, CETA Act, the relevant treasury regulations and departmental policies. The DG must take appropriate disciplinary action against Mr. Mate for irregular, fruitless and wasteful expenditure incurred, and to continue giving support to SIU in civil litigation process and or any other process currently underway by the SIU. The DPCI must consider this report and establish if any acts of impropriety herein amount to acts of criminal conduct in terms of the prevention and combating of corrupt activities, and pursue criminal investigations against the perpetrators. The next matter is Mantel versus SAA. This was a complaint by Mr. Mantel about alleged procurement irregularities and maladministration concerning the termination of a tender earlier awarded to Mantel Biscuit Factory by SAA Catering subsidiary Chefs. MBF is a catering company supplying on-board meals to SAA, SA Express and mainland passengers. The investigation followed a March 2014 complaint by Mr. Manteli alleging that his company responded to an advertised tender for the supply of dry snacks. The tender was advertised in 2013 April in the Sunday Times, and they then submitted their bids or their documents. And Mr. Mantel alleged receiving an email from a certain Mr. Grounder at Chefs on 21 February 2014 with an attachment of a letter, but signed a day later, in which the acting chief executive of Chefs, Mr. Martin Kemp, congratulating the company for being a successful bidder to supply air chefs with 365,000 units per month, costing around 4 million a month. He further alleged that he was later informed over the telephone while inquiring about the finalization of the agreement and the handover that MBF had not actually been awarded the tender, but rather that the company will merely be a preferred supplier for biscuits. This, according to him, implied air chefs would only use MBF products to its airline clients when requested, and that another company called Whitworth would remain the supplier of crackers for SAA, while MBF crackers may be presented to smaller clients such as SA Express. He was unhappy about that and lodged a complaint. We tried to resolve this matter through mediation and conciliation, but there was no success. And then the challenge was that the withdrawal of the tender award letter and issuing another saying something else was also irregular, as air chefs became functus officio the moment they awarded the tender. He could not withdraw the award without a court order. I further found Mr. Manteli's company was prejudiced in that it suffers financial loss in preparing the tender and the bid documents, traveling, accommodation, exchange of correspondence with SAA. To remedy this situation, SAA chairperson of the board was directed to take cognizance of the finding and issue a written apology to Mr. Manteli and see to it that the complainant is reimbursed for all proven out-of-pocket expenses. The chairperson must further ensure that SAA, the CEOs of air chefs and SAA consider the report insofar as it relates to gaps identified in the National Treasury and Ingiable reports and addresses the gaps, as well as consider the acts of maladministration and improper conduct referred to in the report and take appropriate disciplinary action against any official implicated. Klein Hans versus Free State Department of Human Settlements. This was a complaint lodged by the member of DA, Ms. Klein Hans, concerning the award of a contract for the eradication of asbestos roofs in the Free State Province to Blackhead Consulting Proprietary, trading as Diamond Hill Trading, and by the Provincial Department of Human Settlement in 2014-15 financial year. The investigation was as a result of a complaint lodged by Ms. Klein Hans, the member of the provincial legislature. In essence, the complaint was that the contract was irregularly awarded as it was contrary to Treasury regulations. Following a thorough analysis of the complaint, I decided to investigate three issues. Firstly, I looked into whether the department failed to follow proper procurement processes in awarding the contract to the service provider, whether such conduct was improper, unlawful, and constituted maladministration. This allegation is substantiated. Secondly, I investigated whether the services provided were cost effective and whether the department received value for money in the execution of this contract. This allegation is also substantiated. Lastly, I investigated whether the advance payment to the service provider was irregular and whether the invoices which the department made payments on complied with the legislative prescripts. This allegation was also substantiated. A copy of this report has been provided to the National Director of Public Prosecutions in terms of the Public Protector Act to notify her that I'm of the opinion that the facts disclose the commission of an offense. A copy was also provided to the head of Special Investigation Unit to investigate the possibility of recovery of any fruitless or wasteful expenditure, and because there's a current proclamation existing which was issued by the President. I noted in the news last week that the Premier of the Free State has handed a copy of the report to the police to comply with the directive. With regard to the appropriate remedial action, I direct the Premier to take appropriate steps to ensure that the conduct of the accounting officer and the Director of Supply Chain Management is investigated in terms of Section A4 of the Public Finance Management Act. and that the conduct is reported in terms of Section 86 of the PFMA to the South African Police Service and the Directorate for Priority Crime Investigation. In addition to this, the HOD must take appropriate steps to ensure that the conduct of the Director, SCM, is investigated in terms of Section 84 of the PFMA. The HOD to also take appropriate steps to ensure that the Department's supply chain management policy is amended to correctly reflect the legislative prescripts and to take appropriate steps to ensure that officials are properly trained in this respect. I must clarify that the HOD I'm referring to here is the person is the position and not the person implicated who held the position at the time of the project. The Premier will address this. I must also make mention that we received review papers from the accounting officer. We have also noted that the Premier, Ms. Ndombela, has handed this report as I've indicated above. Another investigation relates to improper, dishonest act or corruption. It's Tsatsimpe versus Mahikeng local municipality. This complaint was lodged in 2015, in which it was alleged that the municipality failed to complete the construction of an access road from Kalpan to North Gedach villages from gravel to tar. The complaint was lodged by Mr. Tsatsimpe. The investigation focused on 3 issues: whether the municipality improperly failed to complete the construction of the access road; second, whether the municipality regularly paid the contractor for the incomplete construction of the road, resulting in irregular, fruitless, wasteful expenditure; last, whether the circumstances, the complainant and the community of Kalpan village were prejudiced as a result of the conduct of the municipality. I found that all 3 allegations were substantiated. A period of 8 years has lapsed while the construction of the access road remained incomplete. The contractor was paid $4,439,000, including VAT. The erstwhile head of Department of Roads, Mr. Kembo, certified that the account was correct, that the service was rendered, and that the charges were fair and reasonable. The municipality failed to provide my office with the names of officials who inspected the road and who authorized the payment of the contractor. To remedy this situation, the municipal manager has to ensure that the report is tabled before the council. Must also make sure that the conduct, they must within 90 days conduct an analysis of work still to be done on the road to determine the costs and the timelines, and within 120 days of the report determine the amount overpaid to the contractor and initiate legal processes to claw back those excess amounts. And further, the Directorate for Priority Crime Investigation to also investigate this matter for any possible criminal conduct, and they must take internal disciplinary action for those involved, and they must provide my office with the action plan on the steps which will be followed. The next one is Nyatela versus the National Arts Council. This matter was investigated after a complaint was lodged by Mr. Freddie Nyatela on behalf of South African Roadies Association. He alleged abuse of power and subversion of due process by the CEO of NAC and falsification of SARA's funding application by the CEO. This matter was investigated, and we had the issue whether the CEO submitted the application to EXCO for partnership funding using the complainant's name without his consent, and if so, whether such conduct was improper and constituted maladministration. This allegation was substantiated. The second one, whether there was an impropriety or abuse of expired projects and surplus policy by NEC in the distribution of surplus funds, resulting in the prejudice to the complainant. The allegation too is substantiated. So for remedial action, the Minister of Arts and Culture to note the report in as far as the findings and remedial action contained therein are concerned, and as the executive authority to assist in ensuring that the remedial action as provided for are expedited. The chairperson of the board of NAC must act in accordance with his fiduciary duty to ensure that Inconsistencies identified in the policy during my investigation are addressed by setting in motion a process to amend the policy and promulgate standard operating procedures on the implementation of these expired projects and surplus funds policy, so as to align it with relevant legislative prescripts, amend and strengthen the expired projects and surplus policy in order to close the gaps and prevent NAC staff and other NAC stakeholders from exploiting the policy contrary to the ethos of fairness, equity, transparency, competition, and cost effectiveness as enshrined in Section 217 of the Constitution. Where necessary, put in place standard operating procedures to cure such inconsistencies. Generally, align this policy, align the internal NAC policy toolkit with relevant prescripts, as mentioned, and further, within 30 days of issuing the report, ensure that the letter of apology is issued to the complainant, and must also within 30 days of issuing this report, ensure that the CEO has put in place a declaration of interest register for all NAC employees relating to projects they have initiated since 2015. Therefore, in conclusion, these findings show serious deficiencies in the areas of appointments of staff, public procurement. They also point to the propensity by some state functionaries to abuse their power. Such findings have become so frequent that it appears that the problems are systemic. I urge the public sector to use these findings and remedial action to fix their systems. Use these reports even when they do not relate to their departments, so that they don't repeat such maladministration. In the same vein, I wish to remind all affected parties that the constitutional pronouncement in conforming to the powers of my office, especially in the matter between EFF versus the Speaker, the Chief Justice, was very clear, stating that complaints are lodged with the PP to cure incidents of impropriety, prejudice, unlawful enrichment, or corruption in government circles. An appropriate remedy must mean an effective remedy, for without effective remedies for breach and the values underlying such as entrenched in the Constitution cannot be properly upheld or enhanced. So taking appropriate remedial action is much more significant than making a mere endeavor to address complaints, which was the most the public protector could do in the interim constitution. But currently, the public protector can now take a binding remedial action. However sensitive, embarrassing, and far-reaching the implications of her report and findings, she is constitutionally empowered to take action that has the effect, if it is best, attempt at curing the root cause of the complaint. So the legal effect of these remedial action measures may simply be that those to whom they are directed are to consider them properly with due regard to their nature, context, language, to determine what course to follow. So the public protector's powers to take appropriate remedial action is wide, but certainly not unfettered. What remedial action to take in a particular case will be informed by the subject matter. And further, that implicit in the words take action is that the public protector is herself empowered to decide on and determine the appropriate remedial measure. And action presupposes, obviously, where appropriate, concrete or meaningful steps. Nothing in this way suggests that she necessarily has to leave the exercise of the power to take remedial action to other institutions. So the public protector is empowered to determine the appropriate remedy and prescribe how it should be implemented. So more recently, we have the EFF versus Godan matter, where the public protector was also part of that court process in the Constitutional Court, and the Constitutional Court was also very clear that the public protector is not insulated from criticism, but cautioned against the penchant by some in society to make comments that could be perceived as undermining the office and its constitutional powers. In this respect, the court stated that similarly, the public protector is a constitutional servant like the courts, and her office should be afforded that respect, especially when investigating the executive and all those who hold public office, who must be held to account. Her role in our constitutional democracy cannot be gainsaid. While she may be criticized, these comments should not be perceived as undermining her office and its constitutional powers. So I trust that all of this will be taken into account as we engage with my findings in these reports, which are issued today. The copies we have been uploaded, or we're busy uploading them in the website, and we hope that the website will be utilized by various state institutions to see what kind of reports we've issued and learn from them. Let us stay safe and observe the lockdown regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Public Protector. We are now going to take questions. We have a few colleagues here from the broadcast media side in the House with us. But we have others also following proceedings here via social media platforms. We have already received a few questions in that regard, but let's start with those that are with us here in the House. I see there are two hands, Mr. Appel and Mr. Stillman, in that order, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Advocate Michael from the NCA. I remember back to the 25th of April last year when you and I were in Irregular. After reading 26 pages, I won't ask for a very long answer from you. I'll simply ask, where is the Irregular Dairy report on politically implicated persons? Thank you.
Good day, Stephen Stillman from SABC News. Perhaps let me start with the matter that implicates my organization. You mentioned there that the complaint is correct, substantiated, and what I want to find out then is what is your remedy? Like, what are you saying? You're saying that SABC must confirm the person's position and that she must be put back in that position. So can you just offer clarity as to what it is that you are asking of the SABC? And also this matter dates back to 2017. It was different management then, and there's a lot of new management that is enforced changes. So some of these remedies that you are saying that they must make sure that everybody at SABC adheres to recruitment policies and all of that. Is that a reflection of current affairs now in SABC, or is that simply related to 2017? And also, the time frame of this, if you look at this and now you are giving your remedies almost 3 years later, then how does it help if a complaint came in 2017 and only in 2020 we get to find a finding? So can you just give us a bit of clarity when it comes to the SABC matter? Second question relates to the matter of the former Johannesburg mayor, Mr. Mashaba, who had said that he would lay criminal charges against the leaked draft report that it seems to implicate him in wrongdoing. What is your take on that? And also, where is the report? We're expecting to see it here today.
Thank you, Mr. Stillman and Mr. Apple. Perhaps quickly before you respond, let me give you the 3 questions from Newsroom Africa. The first one is exactly the same as that of Mr. Apple. They want to establish what is the latest with regard to the Irregular Dairy Farm investigation, whether your office is still struggling to track down the intended beneficiaries as mentioned earlier in the year. The second question, on the complaints regarding the lockdown irregularities, please can you give us some detail on what kind of complaints have these been And then the last one, as your statement, or as you say in your statement, you have urged organs of state to establish internal complaints handling units so that your office is not inundated with complaints. What has the response been from the government regarding this request? Are these units being set up? And if so, can you please give examples? And I think there is another question from a gentleman by the name of Sarah van der Wel. It's exactly the same question as that of Mr. Apple. It has to do with the Friede investigation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Appel, that investigation, when it was launched by the Portfolio Committee, I indicated that that investigation falls within our good governance and integrity investigations, and normally our time frame for that is 24 months. And all the beneficiaries were interviewed, but there were two beneficiaries which we couldn't track, especially the ones who signed the service level agreement with the then Free State provincial government. We struggled to trace them, as Newsroom is asking, and finally we managed to get hold of them. And another struggle which we had was that we needed assistance from the law enforcement, especially the NPA and other law enforcement agencies, to assist us with whatever evidence they have in their possession, which will assist us. Remember, we were only focusing on maladministration or any benefit which the politicians might have had, and as well we are focusing on the prejudice to the beneficiaries. And I must indicate that that report is still not yet ready, and we are at the final stages of, I said that I know, but unfortunately I am not in a position also to commit to a particular date, because the investigators have several investigations which they are busy with. As the public protector, you can put pressure on the investigation staff, but unfortunately with the workload which we're having, it would be unfair, especially if we have the service standards we are working within, instead of prioritizing other matters and leaving others behind. And remember, this is not a mere investigation. It's purely it's a matter which we are investigating like any other matter. I do have the executive manager responsible for good governance. Maybe when we find time, he can just indicate how far we are with that particular matter. And then Mr. Stearman, indeed, I indicated earlier that the role of the public protector is to, and one of what the Chief Justice said, that we need to identify any problems in the system and deal with the root cause of the problem, irrespective of who is at the SABC currently. And I'm saying any other institution, they should be reading our reports to make sure that even in their administration, they don't repeat the maladministration or improper conduct or any flaws which were or non-compliance to prescripts by the previous administration. So in this matter, we have determined that during the investigation, we engaged the current management with the chairperson, who was very cooperating and also indicated that there are several matters they've taken to court to also review under the previous public protector report. So we requested that if they can assist us in this particular matter. we discovered that when we request documents and the policies of SABC, the way they were followed, some of the issues were not properly adhered to, because she was transferred to SABC from Lesedi in the Free State to head office in Johannesburg, and that transfer was not in compliance with the internal policies of SABC. So what I must say is that we requested the current administration to make sure that that position, because it is possible to regularize a position of a person if the current administration is saying our policies allows us to appoint Ms. Chubisi permanently because of the following requirements which Ms. Chubisi is having. I'm just trying to find the report so that I can take you through what our findings were. Because what we've also done is that we've sent the Section 79 to SABC, we've sent the Section 79 to Ms. Chubisi. We said my investigation focused on whether SABC functionaries appointed Ms. Chubisi to the position in question without following and adhering to applicable recruitment procedures and prescripts, and if so, whether that conduct was improper and amounted to maladministration. So both of them were found to be substantiated. But to remedy this improper conduct, the CEO should take steps within 30 days of this report in line with the recruitment processes and applicable processes to confirm the appointment of Ms. Chubisi to the position of producer or place her in a commensurate in a position commensurate with her level within SABC. Remember, she came from Lesedi. I think she was on this level of producer or presenter in the Lesedi radio slot. So she must be placed in the position which is equivalent to what position she was occupying when she was working at Lesedi, or alternatively be taken back to the position she occupied. That's how the report is compiled. So I think if you go through the comprehensive report, that's where we are explaining what policies were violated or what policies were complied with. So issuing this report so late, unfortunately, again, Mr. Stearman, is the time frames which it takes for us to investigate a matter and the cooperation we receive from the various state institutions. But then issuing the report late doesn't mean that the inconsistencies in how the policies are being implemented, or as well issuing this report to allow the current administration to learn from the weaknesses of the previous administration. Then the Mashaba matter, again, we follow various prescripts as an institution. We issue Section 79 notice if a person is implicated, and we give that person enough time, like 14 days in terms of our public protector rules. And what happened in this particular matter, we have also opened a case, a criminal case, because every Section 79 notice, we are very clear that Section 79 notice is only for the person who is implicated or we've given that notice. If there can be evidence that that person shared it with any other third party, it's a criminal offense in terms of the Public Protector Act. So the report will be issued as and when it is ready. Now we were issuing these 35 reports which were due for the previous financial year. And the FIADA report, we've managed to get hold of the affidavits of those leaders of the beneficiaries who signed the contract or service level agreement with the Free State Department. And then I'll hand over to DPP to answer the question of the lockdown, the kind of complaints we've received, and this issue of urging state institution to establish complaint mechanisms. What have we done so far, and what have we achieved, and give examples of how far we are as far as that is concerned.
afternoon, everyone. I'll start with the question regarding the complaints on the lockdown. We do not have complaints on the lockdown irregularities per se. However, the complaints that we've received during the lockdown are pertaining to undesirable conditions at clinics, lack of supply of PPEs, water, and space to ensure social distancing. We've also received complaints on nutrition, water, and sanitation, procurement irregularities, as well as inadequate supply of medication relating to other chronic diseases from the hospital. On the issue of the assistance that we are providing to institutions to set up complaints units, we are currently assisting the CCMA to set up a complaints mechanism within the CCMA. This is to ensure that matters pertaining to the CCMA and the administration thereof are able to be resolved as first instance at the CCMA rather than those matters being brought before the Public Protector South Africa. We have also held meetings with the JPA as well as the Department of Home Affairs in respect of establishing formal complaints mechanisms. They currently do have complaints mechanisms, for example, the JPA. However, this is not strengthened because most of their complaints do come to Public Protector South Africa as first instance. The Department of Home Affairs has an informal complaints system. We are looking at assisting them to formalize this because a large majority of their complainants come before Public Protector South Africa as first instance because they do not have a formalized complaints mechanism.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Public Protector and the Public Protector. I have not got any more questions coming through the social media avenue. Let me check in the house if there are more questions. I see Mr. Stillman still wants to have a bite. And that's just him. Okay, Mr. Mbian will bring the mic to you just now. Thank you.
Good day again. People here from SABC News. Just before we begin with this briefing, good day again. This was Truman from SABC News. Just before we begin with this briefing, we mentioned that we are concerned about the scourge of gender-based violence in the country and that it seems that we are losing the fight against it. So I'm just trying to understand that do you think then law enforcement authorities are failing us in that regard in this fight against gender-based violence? As you stated, that is concerning from your observation. And does this come, has there been any complaints that have been lodged to your office that relate to the gender-based violence at all? Or you are just adding your voice as somebody that occupies a very high-profile office here in this matter? Thank you, that's all.
Thank you, Sipho. Yes, this is adding a voice. Sipho is a person also who's I'm a woman, I have a girl child, and this is concerning. But on top of that, remember we investigate maladministration, undue delay, when people have lodged complaints or they've opened cases against the perpetrators. I mean, you've seen some of the findings I had. There's one against SABC where they are failing to even update the family of the deceased about the progress in their matter. So the kinds of complaints we have, it's where people are complaining about lack of feedback, and the police, after they've opened the case with the police, no feedback from the investigating officer. I mean, whilst the person has lodged a complaint, and what normally happens if the police is delaying to investigate the matter and delay to investigate the matter properly, definitely that falls squarely within the hands of the law enforcement. But again, the concerning factor in South Africa, I think I was in the Eastern Cape, where the police were also saying that you'll find that victims are the ones who are withdrawing those cases. I think there's a serious deliberation which must be had within the law enforcement and the justice system. Can you, as the state, because that is a state case, is not the case of the victim. I mean, when I open a matter, that is a state case. Why, as the state, we allow even the victims? Because most of them are femicide-related matters. Yes, you cannot control how people are conducting their relationships. But then as soon as a person is committing a crime, which is provided for in the Criminal Procedure Act, or which is also creating these challenges for the country, definitely the state must act irrespective of whether the person is withdrawing the matter, and the victim must be compelled to testify against the perpetrator, because I think that's where we should be. I mean, we are busy dealing with this matter, but I think we are also not dealing with it as we would want the state, which is in authority, should be dealing with the matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Public Protector. I don't think there are any more questions. We will therefore adjourn the media briefing. Thank you so much for the participation, colleagues.
All right, that's the Public Protector's briefing then this afternoon, taking place in Pretoria on a number of investigations of cases brought to the desk of Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane during the first quarter 2020-2021 financial year. You can hear some of the cases are linked to supply of sanitizers and other COVID-19 essential supplies, cases also relating to fraud and corruption and improper appointments. Advocate Mkhwebane outlining some of the findings that her office has made then this afternoon. The Public Protector also investigating and focusing on SABC's recruitment processes. The Deputy Public Protector there, Advocate Galeka, also adding to what the Public Protector said there. Of course, she replaced long-standing Deputy Public Protector, Advocate Kevin Malunga. So that is coming out of Pretoria this afternoon. We do await President Cyril Ramaphosa's address. We understand he is to address us from Luthuli House. And of course, we will be catching up with that address relating to Youth Day. As we know, tomorrow we'll be celebrating June 16. That's Youth Day here in South Africa. So a briefing from the President along with the Alliance partners on those commemorations. So do stay tuned to SA Today here on SABC News.